Welcome to episode 74 of your CySA Plus Prepcast. In this episode, we will explore the concept and practice of context-aware vulnerability analysis. Traditional vulnerability assessments often rely solely on standardized severity scores, such as CVSS, to prioritize remediation. While this provides a consistent foundation, it does not always reflect the unique conditions within each organization. Context-aware analysis goes further by incorporating asset value, threat intelligence, environmental factors, and security controls into the decision-making process. This approach helps analysts focus on the vulnerabilities that matter most, reduce wasted effort, and ensure that remediation is aligned with actual risk. Mastering context-aware vulnerability analysis is a vital skill for real-world cybersecurity operations, and a core topic covered in the CySA Plus exam. Let's start by defining what context-aware vulnerability analysis means. This method evaluates vulnerabilities not just by standardized scoring systems, but by interpreting them within the specific operational and security context of the organization. Analysts consider the type of system affected, its business function, exposure to external threats, and the controls already in place to mitigate risk. This allows for a more refined and accurate assessment of how dangerous a given vulnerability truly is in the environment where it resides. By aligning vulnerability analysis with business context, analysts can prioritize issues in a way that delivers the most meaningful impact. Traditional scanning tools assign risk levels based on general criteria. However, a vulnerability labeled critical in one organization may pose far less risk in another, depending on where it occurs and what protections are in place. Context-aware analysis helps overcome the limitations of generic scores by tailoring risk assessments to match organizational realities. Analysts look beyond the base CVSS number and ask deeper questions about exploitability, exposure, and impact. This customized approach enhances precision and makes remediation strategies more efficient. One of the first elements analysts assess in context-aware analysis is asset criticality. Not all systems are created equal. Some store sensitive personal information, support revenue-generating services, or control mission-critical processes. A vulnerability on one of these systems carries greater risk than the same vulnerability on a low-priority test machine. Analysts categorize assets based on business value, sensitivity, and operational impact. This asset classification forms the foundation for contextual risk assessment and supports intelligent remediation prioritization. Threat intelligence is an integral component of context-aware analysis. Analysts incorporate real-world data about exploits, threat actor behavior, and active campaigns to assess how likely a vulnerability is to be targeted. For example, if a vulnerability is being actively used in ransomware attacks or is linked to a known threat group, its urgency increases dramatically. Conversely, a vulnerability with no known exploit or threat activity may receive lower priority. Threat intelligence helps analysts make informed decisions and ensures that vulnerability management remains responsive to evolving risks. Understanding the operational environment is also essential. Analysts evaluate how systems are deployed, how they communicate, and what security boundaries exist. A vulnerability in a server isolated by segmentation and protected by multiple controls is less urgent than the same vulnerability on an internet-facing endpoint. Analysts analyze factors such as network topology, cloud architecture, access permissions, and third-party integration. These environmental details provide critical context for assessing real-world exploitability and impact. Security control analysis plays a significant role in context-aware assessments. Analysts examine which preventive and detective controls are in place and whether they are effectively mitigating the risk associated with a vulnerability. For instance, if a vulnerable service is monitored by an endpoint detection platform and access is restricted through firewall rules, the overall risk is reduced. Analysts do not evaluate vulnerabilities in isolation. They consider how existing defenses influence the likelihood and impact of exploitation. This helps avoid overestimating the danger posed by well-defended systems. Exploitability scenarios are often mapped out during context-aware analysis. Analysts consider whether a vulnerability has a publicly available exploit, how complex it is to use, what level of access it provides, and whether an attacker could realistically reach the target system. They also examine how the vulnerability fits into common attack chains, such as initial access, privilege escalation, or lateral movement. This analysis adds depth to prioritization and supports risk-based remediation strategies that focus on realistic threat scenarios. Compliance requirements must also be considered. Certain vulnerabilities may not pose immediate technical risk but still require urgent remediation due to regulatory implications. Analysts assess vulnerabilities in the context of frameworks such as PCI DSS, HIPAA, GDPR, and NIST. A vulnerability affecting encryption settings or data access controls may trigger non-compliance and legal exposure. In these cases, compliance mandates elevate the priority level, even if the technical exploitability is moderate. Context-aware analysis ensures that regulatory responsibilities are addressed alongside cybersecurity concerns. Impact analysis is a central element of this approach. Analysts evaluate both technical and business consequences. Technical impacts may include data loss, denial of service, or credential compromise. Business impacts include service outages, reputational damage, financial loss, and operational disruption. Analysts consider what would happen if a vulnerability were exploited, both from a systems perspective and from a strategic standpoint. By connecting technical risk to organizational outcomes, analysts help decision-makers understand the true stakes of vulnerability remediation. To maintain integrity and ensure repeatability, analysts document their findings and methodology throughout the context-aware analysis process. Documentation includes how asset criticality was determined, how threat intelligence was applied, and what exploitability conditions were considered. It also records the rationale for prioritization decisions and links findings to compliance requirements. This transparency supports accountability, facilitates collaboration, and enables audits or third-party reviews to assess the strength of the vulnerability management program. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are more security courses on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Analysts frequently utilize context-aware analysis to refine vulnerability remediation timelines. Rather than relying on generic severity scores alone, analysts determine how quickly a vulnerability needs to be addressed based on its placement within the environment and its exposure to threats. For example, a critical vulnerability on a publicly accessible application might warrant immediate remediation, while a moderate vulnerability on a segmented development server may be deferred without increasing risk. This prioritization ensures that remediation efforts are directed where they will have the greatest impact on organizational security. Effective context-aware analysis is built on a foundation of robust asset management. Analysts maintain detailed asset inventories that categorize systems by type, function, and business value. Each asset is tagged with attributes such as data sensitivity, external accessibility, uptime requirements, and ownership. These classifications provide the context needed to evaluate how a vulnerability on one asset compares in importance to a similar vulnerability on another. Analysts use this data to ensure that remediation prioritization reflects actual risk rather than just standardized metrics. Modern vulnerability management platforms increasingly support automation of context-aware analysis. These platforms integrate with asset databases, threat intelligence feeds, and scanner outputs to enrich vulnerability findings with contextual data. Automation allows analysts to apply asset criticality scores, confirm exploit availability, and check for compensating controls in real time. This streamlines the assessment process and enables faster, more accurate decision-making. Automated context-aware workflows reduce the burden on analysts while increasing consistency and scalability across large environments. Continuous monitoring is another essential component. Analysts use real-time alerting systems, behavior analytics, and telemetry tools to track changes in asset status, exposure, or risk. If a system previously deemed low risk becomes internet-facing or is added to a critical workflow, its vulnerability prioritization changes. Monitoring tools help analysts detect these changes immediately and reevaluate vulnerabilities in light of the updated context. This dynamic adjustment improves the relevance of prioritization and ensures that no high-risk issues go unnoticed. Collaboration is fundamental to successful context-aware analysis. Analysts work closely with IT operations teams, application developers, system administrators, and business stakeholders to understand how systems function, what data they hold, and how critical they are to operations. These conversations help clarify the potential impact of vulnerabilities and guide decisions about acceptable remediation timelines. Analysts also rely on stakeholders to implement mitigation strategies, so clear communication and mutual understanding are key to successful execution. Context-aware analysis must also be continuously updated. As threat landscapes shift and new vulnerabilities are discovered, analysts revisit prior assessments to ensure they remain accurate. Changes in cloud architecture, business priorities, regulatory requirements, or security control effectiveness may all alter the context in which a vulnerability is evaluated. Analysts maintain a schedule of periodic reviews, ensuring that prioritization reflects current organizational realities and not outdated assumptions. This adaptive approach supports a proactive and responsive vulnerability management strategy. Training analysts in context-aware methodologies is essential for maintaining effectiveness. Training includes interpreting threat intelligence, understanding regulatory obligations, applying asset classification frameworks, and assessing exploitability. Analysts learn to evaluate technical details within business context, ensuring that their assessments reflect both cybersecurity principles and organizational needs. Scenario-based exercises help build real-world experience and improve judgment in balancing technical severity with operational risk. Analysts also perform regular evaluations of their vulnerability prioritization strategies. They analyze past remediation decisions to determine whether vulnerabilities were appropriately addressed and whether any were deprioritized in error. These assessments help identify weaknesses in the context-aware process and support continuous improvement. Analysts also assess whether threat intelligence is being applied effectively and whether asset classification remains accurate. This review process ensures the integrity and effectiveness of the overall vulnerability management program. Context-aware analysis significantly improves an organization's ability to manage risk. By tailoring vulnerability prioritization to reflect real-world conditions, analysts focus on the most impactful issues and avoid spending time on lower-risk findings that pose little practical danger. This approach enhances security posture, reduces unnecessary remediation workload, and supports stronger alignment between cybersecurity efforts and business objectives. It also demonstrates a mature, risk-based approach to security, which is increasingly expected in compliance audits and third-party assessments. Comprehensive documentation remains a final best practice in context-aware vulnerability analysis. Analysts record their methodologies, scoring logic, asset evaluations, remediation decisions, and threat intelligence sources. This documentation supports audit readiness, team coordination, and knowledge transfer. It also allows organizations to demonstrate due diligence in the face of regulatory scrutiny or post-incident analysis. Clear and consistent documentation ensures that decisions are transparent, defendable, and part of a repeatable security process. To summarize, Episode 74, Mastering Context-Aware Vulnerability Analysis, gives cybersecurity analysts the ability to prioritize vulnerabilities accurately and respond to threats based on their actual impact in the organizational environment. By incorporating factors such as asset criticality, threat intelligence, environmental exposure, and exploitability, analysts create a vulnerability management process that is focused, efficient, and aligned with business needs. These techniques reduce organizational risk, improve operational coordination, and directly support your CySA Plus exam success. Stay tuned as we continue your comprehensive journey towards CySA Plus certification success. Thanks for listening. To learn more about cybersecurity, please visit baremetalcyber.com. There you will find best-selling books, videos, and even more free cybersecurity training courses. Please subscribe to the Prepcast and our various podcasts. And thanks for listening.